She's April.
And she's Molly.
And we are
the Book Besties.
I've grown increasingly fond of dick.
We would like to normalize regular-sized dicks.
And you can imagine whatever size you want, because any size can feel good.
It's the spotted dick, man.
Monster porn!
Anyway, since we've established that your erections are chilly and sluggish but serviceable,
Grandma's reading porn.
And our new friend, Olivia Dade.
Olivia Dade! Welcome! Thank you so much.
We're so excited to have you.
Well, I am delighted to be here and just really thrilled to chat with you today. So thank you for having me.
This is like a dream. I have read all your books, and
she's not joking. She has.
I'm not joking. I may or may not have brought all 9 of them to you this summer and said, here's all 9 of the things that I have copies of. Will you sign them? And so I really enjoy your writing. I can't get enough of it. And so I'm so excited to have you here with us talking about your books. It's going to be awesome.
Ditto. But I'm also here for the writing because, girl, you can write.
Mm-hmm.
You can write as a writer that's not published. Girl, you can write.
I am, like I said, I'm honored that you thought of me. I'm honored that you've read so many of my books, including the ones that are lesser sort of heralded in my backlist. And because I am very fond of them, even if not as many people have discovered them, or and thank you very much for the compliments about my writing. I try. Every writing, people love different types of writing, so no one, but I try. So I'm glad that you like it.
You try really good. You try really good, Olivia. I need you to know that. Your trying is more than trying, babe. I promise you. Take it from a hard trier.
I am not a writer. I'm a librarian. So, I consume books. I recommend books. Your book is currently on display in my library. Actually, spoiler alert is one, because I made a Taylor Swift in our reading era display. And so I have books that represent every album. And so I have spoiler alert under the Lover album.
Ooh,
so
nice.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
And spoiler alert is a great one to display just because Lenny, even apart from the book itself, Lenny Kaufman's cover is so iconic for spoiler alert.
That one's
First Spite. My bad.
No, Lenny Kaufman's cover for that, also gorgeous. But that one, I think, really put both of us. Her cover, I don't think that book would have done as well. As much as proud as I am of that book, it got a lot of attention in part because of how
beautiful the cover is.
Beautiful, gorgeous the cover was. And unapologetic, that there is a beautiful fat woman on the cover and there's no denying that she is fat or that she's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Right. Because you can be both.
Does she illustrate all of your covers?
She has illustrated pretty much all of them, except for if you go back to a couple of my novellas in the Love Unscripted series. But other than that, it's been her all the way for all of my covers.
Amazing.
Well, we read spoiler alert in our
I would have to go back.
Or 3rd season. It was one of those. It was for me the first time I had read a plus size main character, who is a bigger body, fat, however you want to word it. Mm-hmm. She's a redhead and her name is April. And I was like, well, this is hard to separate reality from fiction.
Season 3. Season 3. I know. Well, don't even get me started on First Spite, because you wrote a Matthew in that is broody, doesn't like to talk, and is angry at the world.
And that's my husband.
That's my husband.
Named Matthew.
Who's a redhead, though.
I apologize, and I promise to stop spying on you at some point.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
If I understand correctly, my name might be on the list. So
it's all right. Well, you can just write a Thomas and don't make his counterpart Molly, because that will just
that'll make
that. But you can do Thomas because that's my husband. I'll allow it.
Yeah, Molly. It's Molly and Carl for. It was going to be called Dearly Departed, but now they want to call it Second Chance Romance. So that's the
Oh,
follow up to At First Sight. So that is
Mhm.
Molly, and I do have Thomas. I think Desire in the Deep Blue Sea. Is that Thomas?
oh, that might be.
Oh, I think you're right.
It's been a long time since I wrote it. It's been a while, but that may be Thomas. So I may
My
have already
sticker's
hit your husband. I'm sorry.
One of my
Yes,
favorite.
Thomas. This is one she's talking about.
Yep.
Yeah, one of my favorite things with authors is like you can literally go to the fans and be like, look, you probably know the material better than I do by now. You know what I mean? Because some fans will reread things, and
Right.
it becomes their comfort read. And you're like,
Mhm.
well, you probably know it better than me because you
Mhm.
have consumed it twice in a week. And
Yeah.
I wrote it 6 years ago.
If it's okay, I'm gonna read your author bio, if that's all
Sure.
right, and then
Of
we
course.
can
Do the things.
we can talk about your books and your writing and all the things. Okay, so Olivia Dade grew up an undeniable nerd prone to ignoring the world around her as she read any book she could find. Her favorites, though, were always romances. As an adult, she earned an MA in American history and worked in a variety of jobs that required the donning of actual pants: colonial Williamsburg interpreter, high school teacher, academic tutor, and of course, librarian. Now, however, she has finally achieved her lifelong goal of wearing pajamas all day. Same, that's my goal too, as a hermit-like writer and enthusiastic hag. She currently lives outside Stockholm with her delightful family and their ever-burgeoning collection of books.
Love it.
Yep.
I love it.
Were you a history teacher? Is that what you taught? Or were you an English teacher?
I was a history teacher. I taught U.S. and world history, but U.S. was really by far my strong suit because that's what I got my graduate degree in. And colonial Williamsburg, of course, that timeline was
so
that.
like this.
Yes, there was a lot of me in that one. In fact, I had a couple of old axes to grind. Put up in that one. I mean, there's no other way that the main conflict of a book is going to be they took away my honors world history classes. I mean, there's a reason, first of all, that was not traditionally published because that was never going to be the main conflict in a traditionally published book. But
The story had to be told.
I had some things to work through. I worked through them.
As a former high school English teacher, I feel that in my soul. The year that they told me, you're not going to have honors classes or pre-AP this year, you're just going to have, I taught journalism, so they took away my honors and pre-AP classes, and they're like, you're just going to have the traditional 10th grade English. And I was like, first of all, 10th grade English is the worst. Second of all, I don't get any honors classes this year. Are you kidding me? So I get it. I get it.
We all have stuff we have to work out.
Yeah.
Just putting it on the page is easier, especially when you just get to someone and you're like, it makes you feel better.
It's true. Yeah, actually, one of my favorite stories of yours, I look at me, just keep pulling books. I should have just pulled them all off. So this book, Sweetest in the Gale, is a collection of 3 short stories, novellas, whatever you want to call them. And I'll tell you what, Candy Albright, that girl, I feel her in my bones. I'm like, yes, I understand Candy so well. Because she is a badass English teacher who's like unapologetic about forcing, making her kids do all the things. And like, I'm like, yes, that's who I was. So yeah, I like her.
I love writing novellas. And not every reader loves novellas, but I really enjoy them. I would love to do more in the future. So
I think it's just like a hard sell,
Yeah.
Because I feel like maybe now with Kindles and Kindle Unlimited, which # not sponsored, I don't have any of that.
# not sponsored.
If I'm going to, like your novella that just came out, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, All by My Elf, I read it on my phone because I don't have a Kindle. I like books. I like to feel books. But this collection here, I ended up reading it as an audiobook, which we're going to talk about audiobooks with you a little bit later. But I listened to the audiobook and I listened all the way through. And I was having a really bad, like, I have an anxiety disorder and OCD, and I talk about it on this podcast a lot because I think it's really important that we talk about mental health in a positive way. And I was in a spiral. And so after I finished listening to all three of them, I said to my husband, you know what? I'm going to listen to those again. And he was like, because, you know, there were parts of the third one that I was like, I felt like it needed more time to develop. That was, sorry to give you a little critique, but I wanted more of that story to develop. But the first one in particular, there's no sex in that book. They never have sex. And to me, it was so intimate. The email exchange that they have, I was just like, this is fucking beautiful. And so I immediately listened to the whole thing again on my one of my library apps. I was just like, it's just awesome. So Kelsey Navarro was living rent free in my head for a while. She was narrating my life, which is awkward, but it was happening.
It happens. Jennifer Ikeda and I have a very solid relationship because of Deborah Harkness. So I feel you.
No, she is so good. I mean, we can talk. I mean, we can actually address your question about her now if you want.
Sure, we can. We skip around a lot too. I guess I could have told you that, but yeah. So one of the things let me find it. It's all the way down here. Oh my gosh, I can't even. Here. Okay, here we go. So, I said that I narrate. Okay. So, what keeps you coming back to Kelsey Navarra, and do you get to pick your narrators?
A lot of times with publishers, they give you a short list of options, and then you choose the one that you are most interested in. Although sometimes, if it's someone, they say if you have someone in mind, let us know, and you can hopefully get that person. So to begin with Kelsey, she was on a list of possible narrators for me. I think for all the feels, and I thought tonally her voice and her inflections and sort of how she did that fit with my characters, and that she is a little bit, her humor has some dry humor and like some sarcasm to her voice, and it doesn't feel like fundamentally girlish, if that makes sense. Or like, it's not that she's not sweet, but that they feel like when she spoke it, she seemed like a person who could potentially seem like the sort of female main characters that I write.
Yeah.
Like, someone who's I mean, Kelsey's not older, but someone who's not in their early 20s, who has seen a bit of the world and has, again, is not necessarily super innocent and girlish. And so I really appreciate that, and like her ability to be deadpan and sarcastic a little bit. So and I thought she did a great job with my books. So yeah, I just kept asking for her.
Yeah.
I have to agree. As someone that consumes audiobooks primarily, I have dyslexia. We've talked about that a lot on here. Audiobooks is my rave for reading. And Kelsey is one of those authors that makes you feel like she's a part of the story. Yes. She is, sorry, I misspoke. She and you go hand in hand now for me. Like, she's your voice for me in a lot of beautiful ways.
But she didn't narrate at First Bite, right? You had a different narrator for that?
Yes. And, part of that was my publisher wanted to think about having a narrator who is a self-identified fat woman and part of sort of fat liberation. And Joy Nash, who's also very talented, although I adore Kelsey Navarro, is also part of like fat positivity and is very active in that. And, things sort of
transitioned.
Yeah.
Things transitioned for that. But I love Kelsey, which she knows. And I am sure that she and I will work together in the future again, too.
Yeah.
So
she's really great. And if you are on social media and you're on TikTok, follow Kelsey Navarro's TikTok. She posts feedback that she gets after she's recorded something, and it's hilarious, the edits that she has to make. Like, she was supposed to say hand one time and she said ham, and she's like, there's no way. And then she played it, she was like, oh my gosh, I really did say ham. It's so funny. She's got such a great sense of humor, and she's very relatable. So yeah.
She's lovely. And also I actually interviewed her because Molly, there aren't a lot of scenes about it in the book because it's set. Molly in Second Chance Romance, the follow up to Adverse Fight,
This can be confusing.
is a narrator, like a
Yeah.
romance novel narrator who narrates fictional
monster
authors.
porn. She narrates monster
books.
porn.
I'm here for it. I'm here for it.
And so I mean, Kelsey was so gracious. You know, she we sat down and like talked for a good long time about what her job entailed and sort of the pitfalls and benefits.
Yeah.
And I was hoping to have more about it in the book, but since in the book, she's currently living in California visiting Harlots Bay, Maryland. So she's not actually working during the book, but I think hopefully at some point in the future, I'll be able to maybe do a bonus scene or revisit her where she's actually working, so I can use some of what I learned from Kelsey, who again was just incredibly gracious and fun and kind. So
that's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. So I am curious, what got you inspired to start writing romance novels in general?
I mean, I think if I were going to write fiction of any sort, there is really no other option for me because I had been reading romances since I was far too young to be reading adult romances before I even understood a lot of the references. And so even though I, especially growing up, used to read very widely in different genres, and I still love, some nonfiction and so forth, it really was, if there was any genre that I felt down to my bones connected to and familiar with, it was romances. I did not expect to write fiction. I did not start, other than like school assignments in high school and younger. I did not start writing fiction until 2014. So when I was, like 37, almost 38. So like, I started later. And I can't even tell you what sort of made me sit down and do it. I think a part of me just, when I was in graduate school for history, I always really loved the writing component. I just really enjoy writing. A lot of the grad students did not, but I enjoyed even essays. Like I just enjoyed writing. And I think a part of me really mourned after I left graduate school, these sort of muscles and capabilities that I had that I had not really used in, well over a decade at that point.
Right.
And I just really was sad about it. And I sat down one day. I was also at the time sad in general. I was super depressed in 2014.
And there.
And I started going to therapy. I think that shook a few things loose in my head for me. And I started writing. And it was such a glorious, it was so joyful to rediscover that part of myself, but it was also just really nice to focus on someone else's thoughts and problems for a while and just wipe my head clean of all the crap that was in there in my own depression, that I could just be in someone else's head for a little while because I was not a huge fan of mine at that time. And so I just started and it was wonderful, and I never stopped. This is by far the longest I've ever done any job I've held or career. And I don't anticipate, this is not like a lot of my other careers where I always sort of wondered, how long can I actually feasibly do this? Is this sustainable? Now, the publishing industry may tell me this is not sustainable, but for me personally, this is sustainable. It's something I want to keep doing for the rest of my life if I can.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have a really good publisher now because you're under Avon Books, which they're doing great. I mean, I think about like the paperback romances that my grandma read that came from Avon.
Yeah, the red ones.
And I was like, Grandma,
that's all I think about when I hear about old romances.
Grandma's reading porn. And I didn't realize that's what she was doing until she passed and we were going through her stuff. And I was like, damn, Grandma. Yeah, like, Avon is like having a huge moment with the cutesy cartoon covers, and they've got some really great authors under them. So I think that's really cool.
I have to agree with you though, Olivia, as I use writing as a way to disassociate. It takes me out of myself. It helps me live in another place and time, especially when my place and time in that moment, I don't want to be there.
Right.
And like to be able to just disassociate and unhook and be another person and write and tell their story instead of having to worry about my problems. Boy, is that nice.
It is really a good writing day where it's been hours where you just haven't even thought about any of that stuff. It's just so delightful. And I am very fortunate because I have Avon, but actually Zomromcom and that series is with Berkeley.
Oh,
Who are
Berkeley's great
also
too.
amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And then actually All By Myself was with Amazon Original Story.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Look at you being all the things. It's amazing.
Thanks. I love it.
Me too.
Really awesome opportunities, and I feel very fortunate. So I'm trying to take advantage of it while I can, because publishing is a notoriously unpredictable business.
She is a fickle, you know what?
Yeah, fickle mistress.
Yeah.
I was going to say the B word, but sure.
What I find to be so interesting is, so little backstory. I have always liked books that had romantic story elements, but never read like romance novels. Molly and I say this a lot too. My heart lives in my vagina. So I'm pretty picky about stories that just are sex. Like, I don't like that. I want there to be a story. I want to fall in love with these characters before they're intimate with each other. And in 2020, when all of us were under a pandemic, I read Red, White, and Royal Blue. And it was the first time that I had read a true like romance novel. Like, they have sex. It is open door. And it helped my anxiety that going through the pandemic and just feeling like I'm definitely going to die. Like, every day felt like that. It helped a lot. And then when Molly and I started our podcast in 2021, partially because we were both looking for a way to escape the feelings of the pandemic, romance became a huge part of our podcast. And so
not by my choice.
Now the majority of my books are romance novels.
Again, not by my choice. I am gender fluid here. Genre fluid, not gender fluid.
I'm like, no, you're not.
Billy Joe.
We like to say that we're genre fluid because we read everything. But yeah, I mean, for me, I would rather sit down and just read romance. It is a good escape for me. So yeah,
I'm a mood reader.
My mood is always horny. So, there you go. Okay. That was embarrassing. Okay.
No. I think, one of the beauties of romance is that, first of all, some romance readers read primarily romance, but there are other romance readers who read widely. But the beauty of the genre as a whole, I've always said, is that whatever else you like, you can find it in romance.
Absolutely.
If you like, if you like suspense, there's romantic suspense. There are romantic mysteries. There is, there are zombie romances. If you like sci-fi, if you want romance on a spaceship, you can have that. You can have historical, like all the other genres. There are romantic westerns. There are western romances. Any other genre that you love is all encompassed in romance. The only thing that has to be in there is there has to be a happy ending for two or more people, sort of, who, are attracted to and or love each other. That is all that's required. The rest of it is completely genre fluid.
Right. Genre fluid.
It encompasses everything in a way that I think is really beautiful.
Yeah. My husband, who is he's a nerd, and I love that for him, but
same.
He routinely listens to sci-fi romance. Like that's his audiobooks of choice, and he's pretty much listening to them all the time. And we share an audiobook app, and occasionally I'll open up and I'll be like, what the fuck are you listening to? Because I'm looking at the cover going, those women are bunnies. And he's like, yeah, don't listen to that one. Don't listen to that one.
All I want is a Firefly-esque space western where Mal and Honora end up happily ever after. That's all I'm looking for, gang. All I'm looking for.
I just am sad that they made a movie and my favorite character died. So, I don't know.
You know how you wash a Reaver's spear, right? Run it through a wash.
Are you a Firefly fan?
I know I went and saw the movie and so forth. I know exactly what you're talking about. Was it
too soon?
Was it light as a feather or something?
Yeah.
Leaf on the wind.
I'm a leaf on the wind.
Yes.
That's the name of my car. That's the name of my car. Leaf on the wind.
Nice.
You will hear random Firefly quotes on this pod randomly.
They'll be from Molly. They won't be from me.
Oh, no. Some people juggle geese. Come on.
Okay, so let's talk about your first series, the Love Struck Librarian series, which is out of print, which breaks my heart, because I can't get it. But the characters are not all typical for what you're known for, because not all of them are plus size. So I'm kind of curious as to when you made up your mind that you were going to shift fully that way.
Right. So my goal for that original series, which if you haven't looked at Interlibrary Loan, I don't know if you've checked, because some libraries do have some of those.
Okay,
so
well, I'm putting an ILL.
You might want to check for an ILL request. But
she's like on it.
My first goal was for body diversity. So like within the series, I had one female main character who had a very slim, sort of more stereotypically boyish, and then I had one who was very athletic, and then I had a woman who is very statuesque, and then I had a couple of plus size, a couple of fat heroines, and so like just trying to run the gamut, of someone who's more muscular, sort of exercising, fit, because I really want to normalize different types of bodies. Yeah. And then, and I'm not going to give you the name. A very well-known author did a book that was really addressing fatness in a way that I thought was super harmful. And I did not necessarily consider that author to be themselves someone who was maybe part of that population. And I got really mad. And I was like,
understandably,
is it okay if I swear, or you prefer?
Yeah, absolutely. No.
Yes.
And I was like, fuck it. Every book from now on, I am writing a fat main character that is going to be not harmful in the way that I think that this is.
Yeah.
I love that you started out of spite. Fuck that woman. Fuck you. I'm doing this better. And get it, Olivia. I'm here for it.
And then every book from there on out, I was like, okay, this is what I'm doing now, because I wanted to counterbalance it, and I just was very, very angry.
And from a writer to another, their size, I mean, it's important, but you've never made it the focus.
Yeah.
You've never made it the focus. And that is massive to me, because there are so many authors that do that, where they make what the body type is, or size, or person's color, disability, gender, whatever it is, the primary focus and the driving point of the storyline. And you're making people. And that's spectacular.
Well, I mean, I think, there's different approaches to talking about any sort of marginalization. And there's some people who want to have it be a bigger part of the story. And I would argue that, in spoiler alert, it actually is a significant part of the story.
Yeah, because April is dealing with,
because I want to talk about, I did not want her to be self-loathing. She loves herself and loves her body, but what she needs to do is, she doesn't need to learn how to love herself. She already does. But she needs to learn how to put up boundaries with the
Mhm.
people in her life who were
Mhm.
making her feel terrible because of her body. And so that's sort of her journey. But I had some things I wanted to say about
Mhm.
fat shaming, particularly fat shaming in the people who do love you,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but are hurting you even though they
Yeah.
love you. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because I think sometimes I had found certain books where there had been a fat female main character, they had often family members who did fat shame them. But
Mhm.
it was never really, it was like, oh, this is terrible, they shouldn't do this. But like, there was never any sort of resolution of that. It's just like,
Yeah.
well, that's what they're like. So I guess, someone loves you, you gotta put up with it.
Yeah.
And I was just like, no.
Yeah.
No.
That is
And
not
I
that.
mean, no.
Yeah.
So I
Not
mean,
not to
I
trauma dump on you for a second, but my mom was like that with me. Like
Mhm,
she very much would be like, I don't think you need to eat dinner tonight. Like you've had enough.
mhm,
And like I am from a Hungarian family, like we're Midwesterners who eat meat and potatoes. Like I have a I'm more likely to be bigger. My mom happened to
mhm.
be 5'2" and very petite, but she also had an eating disorder that she
Right.
was hiding from us. And, there's a lot to do with that. And so seeing that a character that was like, okay, I love these people. I have to keep loving them. They're my parents, but also being somebody that isn't as an adult, really not even until I was in my 40s, setting those boundaries with my mom that we're not
Mhm,
going to talk about food and we're not going to talk about my weight and we're not going to talk about that.
mhm,
I recently had to have surgery. Actually, a few days after I met you this summer, I
Yeah.
had to have
mhm,
surgery on my hip. And my mom kept saying, well, if you lost weight, it would be better. It wasn't weight related at all. Like it wasn't a weight thing at all. And I finally told her, we don't talk about this anymore. And every
Yeah.
time she's brought it up since, I shut the conversation down. And so
Proud of you.
seeing that, like, thank you. It's not easy, but I do it.
No,
And
it's not.
seeing that in books and seeing like your main character in All the Feels, Lauren, the first time that she's like naked with her man, she's like, I'm not ashamed of my body. And it's like, to me, like that is the kind of thing, I mean, not necessarily the nudity, but that's the kind of thing I needed to grow up with. I needed to grow up with somebody who would say, I'm not ashamed of my body. It's
mhm.
bigger. Who cares? Um,
It
and
doesn't help.
yeah, we
Sorry.
talk about this a lot too, because like the trauma of like the 90s and
Yeah,
the early
that's where I was
2000s,
going.
like
That's what it doesn't help that we were advertised Snackwell cookies
yeah,
and diet sodas and
yeah,
told that Diet Pepsi is the only thing then people drink. And
right.
it's just we were shoved this be thin or else
Yeah,
storyline from the
Mhm,
time we were early teens. Like
yeah,
mhm.
heroin chic was a thing for us.
yeah,
We were set up to fail.
yeah. And
We
then,
were set up to fail. And also, as someone that lost a chunk of weight
hmm,
and her body still fucking hates her, it's
hmm,
not the weight, ma.
hmm,
It's never the goddamn weight.
Right.
yeah,
When your body hates you, your body hates you.
yeah.
I'm so sorry you experienced that, April.
Well,
Me too, boo. Me too.
I've worked through a lot of it in therapy. Thank
Mhm.
you, though.
And there's always group chat, love.
Yes, we have a very supportive group chat that every Tuesday morning we all welcome each other to the day by saying Happy Pod Day, because that's when the
Day
pod comes out. And our other best friend Katie, who knows that
is
we're filming with you right now, sent
she's
us
our
all
medical
good luck
expert.
wishes. And
Right.
you met her this summer too. She came to the thing this summer.
Katie's
So
our medical expert.
Right. But that was the sort of thing I wanted to do in spoiler
yeah,
alert, is I wanted to
Yeah.
sort of work through on the page what it would look like to
yeah,
sort of set those sorts of boundaries, because I
yeah,
had not seen that necessarily for a lot of previous books that had had a
yeah,
fat main character and there had
Mhm.
yeah.
been like familial or friend fat
Mm-hmm,
shaming. I
mm-hmm,
wanted boundaries to be set on the page. So
mm-hmm,
that one is not there's a lot going on there even apart from that, but
mm-hmm,
that is a part of the storyline.
yeah,
The thing is that everyone has a different relationship to their body.
mm-hmm,
Like, fat or not fat. Some people, their body is something that they are aware of or working through, sort of
yeah,
trauma associated with it. And there are other people who are just like, oh, it's my
yeah,
body. Like, okay.
yeah.
And so I want to sort of have I did have a couple of characters where their body was something that they do think about, but they don't hate themselves. I
Yeah.
never will write anyone who hates their body.
Yeah.
Because I feel like there's plenty of that out there.
Yeah.
Serious word.
But but then I've sort of said a lot of what I wanted to say, so now it's just, well, I try to be realistic to, what would be if you're living in a 10-foot wide house with these narrow stairs. I might mention in passing, like, it's going to be hard to get up and down those stairs, like
Yeah.
Yeah.
sometimes in some parts, because I try to sort of think about realistically, what is it like to live in a larger body in the world,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But without that being then the focus of the story, because the things I want to say about fatness, maybe there'll be other things I want to say about fatness in the future.
Mm-hmm.
But for the moment, I've said my piece about a lot of stuff. So,
Yeah. Well, and I
We're
feel
grateful
like
for it.
I feel like I mean, I completely agree with you. Like, I do feel like what your books are showing is just human. Like, it doesn't, I agree that, spoiler alert, it's more on the surface there, that like her body being bigger is a key element of that, because April posts that picture of herself on social media, and then everyone tears her down and then everyone assumes that she can't really be a love interest because of the size that she is. But the rest of your books, I do feel like it's more, that's just who they are. It doesn't have to do with it isn't, gosh, I wish I could remember the way that I said this many times before, but they're so unapologetic about who they are.
right.
You know?
Well, I just don't want fatness to be the plot or fatness
Yeah.
to be their character. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
fatness is not a character.
It's
They have to
it's
have
not the
a personality apart from like
Yeah.
fatness. And I
Yeah.
would say the thing about the spoiler alert series is because it's set in Hollywood,
Mm-hmm.
there to me, if you're
Mhm.
trying to base in any sort of sense of like reality at all,
Mm-hmm.
there has to be some addressing of it
Yeah.
Yeah.
because you can't, unless you're setting this in an alternate reality. If you have like the star of an HBO, like the super like fit, like, renowned handsome star of an HBO show, HBO-esque or whatever, who starts dating an obviously fat woman, there is
Mm-hmm.
going to be commentary. Like,
Yeah.
there is just no way you can exist in the world as it now is.
Yeah.
And for
Well,
that not to be something that. So I was trying to sort of tread the line between sort of acknowledging, making it seem like this is not necessarily a completely alternate universe, but at the
Right.
same time, hopefully not making it harmful to readers.
Right.
And readers can judge, different readers are going to have different reactions and want a different amount of acknowledgement
Mm-hmm.
of sort of that reality. Um, so different books are going to have different amounts.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, so the spoiler alert series was one that we discovered through social media,
Mhm.
because our podcast is on TikTok and Instagram, and and what is interesting to me, the first thing that's interesting to me is that you're on Twitter, but you're not. Are you still on Twitter? You are still on Twitter.
I'm updates only because I would prefer that
Yeah.
Elon Musk not make a single red penny from any of
word.
my
Yeah.
content on there. So I've erased all my old tweets and only
Gotcha.
have like the most recent thing. Blue Sky, which has really exploded the last few weeks. I've
Uh-huh.
been on for like a year and a half, but it has exploded the last few weeks, and that is now my
That's your primary.
95%
Yeah.
social media home.
Well, what's interesting to me is so many authors are hustling their books on TikTok and Instagram, and that's how we're discovering a lot of things. And you're not doing that. And so your books became popular because of fans, which is really freaking cool. But I kind of wanted to talk about how the spoiler alert series deals with fan fiction, and I was
Mhm.
wondering, did you dabble in fan fiction? Is that coming from an experience of life experience?
I have never written fan fiction, but there was a period of like a year and a half where, like anything, if you take your hobby and you make it into your job,
Mm-hmm.
it changes things. So,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
like, the reading had always been my primary sort of escape or dissociation, or what I did to sort of clear my head.
Yeah.
and I could sort of fall into a story and forget about everything else. Once I started writing for a living after several years, I found that harder and harder to do, because then I would start thinking about, well, I know this author, and like, how did this book do? And like, why do I think that that book was more successful or did not do as well as I had thought that it should? And like, what publisher are they with? And like, there's all these things where you know too much at
Yeah.
some point to be able to sort of lose yourself, and you're analyzing the story sometimes. Like, you're analyzing a story like, if I love this, what is it I love about this? Like, is there a lesson here, not the story itself, but is there a lesson here that I can take for my own writing? Like, either the way they, like, anyway, if a story doesn't work for me, I'm sort of picking it apart and being like, what is it that I think that went wrong for me here? And this is something that I do. Like, is this something? And then it becomes a lot harder to sort of escape. And then I found myself for a year and a half reading nothing but fan fiction, because it was not commercial.
Right.
I didn't know who, it was back to anonymity. I didn't know who
Yeah.
those people were. They didn't know who I was. I was just reading fan fiction. I read nothing but Jaime Lannister, Brienne of Tarth fan fiction for a year and a half, despite the fact that I never watched Game of Thrones. I mean,
That's fantastic.
so that was, and I did not join any private groups. I only went through like AO3, Archive of Our Own, and I did look at comments, but I never went into any private groups, or because I didn't want anyone to feel like I had sort of like groomed them to like write a story about them. It was just me me genuinely participating and reading all this stuff for like a year and a half, but then also just sort of observing, like, looking at their notes they put in their stories, because it's always interesting. Like, who is there? They always say, well, here, this is my, my beta reader, critique partner, and then I would click over to their story, and like, there would be references to like group events that they would do, and like, special weeks. Like, it would always, what was their special week? It was Jamie's awkward boner. They would have something like that. And so there is a reference in, spoiler alert, because I made it like Aeneas's sad boner. And like, just to have fun, I'm like, and then how do I make it a sad boner? But I figured it out. But so observing that for a year and a half. So I think it is a talent to be able to enter into someone else's story and get their characters, their tone, all of that. That is a skill that would take time and effort to learn. And I really need that time and effort to work on my own stories.
Yeah.
So instead and also I didn't want it to become something else that was work. Like, I just wanted to enjoy it and spend that time. So
I feel you.
That was how I sort of, the fan fiction stuff, that's how I got into it.
Because if we don't write, the imaginary friends don't shut up in our brain.
I had a conversation with Emma Berry, who's a friend of yours, and we interviewed her at Novel Grounds in Chesapeake, Virginia. In October, I had a conversation with her about fan fiction, because I have never read or partaken in any sort of way with fan fiction. I don't quite get it. And that's no offense to the people that write it or read it. It's just not ever been my thing. And so she was asking me how I felt about that being such a like core part of the Spoiler Alert series. And I was like, it was great. I didn't care. I read Rainbow Rowell's fan fiction, and that's like such a great book too. And it was the same thing. Like, I have no desire to read it myself, but I think it's really funny to see it included in books. So but
I can tell you, I had one of the best possible introductions to it, because I didn't really understand it either. And then I saw on Twitter, there's a woman, Kay Taylor Ray, REA, this is when things were looking like things were going to happen for Jamie and Brienne, and they did, but then everything went wrong. But anyway, and she's like, if you want to read fan fiction about them, here's some good starter ones. And one of the ones she listed, I was like, well, I guess I could look, because I like the gifts I saw. Like, and I hadn't seen the show, I just like the gifts. And It was by an author, an archive of our own author called Astolat, Astolat. It was called Traveling Far. And it was like this 30,000 word, which is like a novella, like canon divergence, like things had happened differently than they happened in the book or in the movies. And it was hilarious and hot and just beautifully written, like so voicey that I was like, this could be published. I would buy this if this were published. I found out later, you know who Astolat is?
Who?
Naomi Novik.
Oh.
Which is why I read that and I'm like, damn, this is publishable. And it's because it's Naomi Novik. But she wrote a bunch of fanfic for the Jaime Lannister Brienne of Tarth fandom.
That's amazing.
And like that is like if you hit that first and you're like, and it's free. Like you just go on there, it's free. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And like if you find a pairing or a throupling or whatever that fits like whatever your particular little, the key fits in your lock as far as what you're interested in or something that that just works for you, then it's amazing. You can take this fundamental dynamic and spin it out into like 1,000 different scenarios. And it's incredible. And certain fandoms have better writers, frankly, than others. And it turns out there was a lot of really good writers in the Jaime Lannister Brienne of Tarth, including Naomi Novik.
Look at the Harry Potter fanfic. Like, they go hard.
Yeah, but I don't like Harry Potter.
Yeah,
I don't either. But the Draco Harry stuff, dang.
I know some of those books are coming down the publishing pipeline. And on the one hand, I'm, applaud those authors.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I hate any sort of lifting up of the Harry Potter fandom because J.K. Rowling,
J.K. is such
I think, would be happy just never to hear of her ever again.
I would really like for her to just...
Yeah, it's like sacrilege for a children's librarian to not like Harry Potter. I have read all of them because of Molly, and I have watched all of the movies.
You promised your students before you promised me.
my students I would read them. You're
Don't
right.
blame me.
Okay.
Don't blame me. You told the children you would do it.
Right.
Okay.
I don't want to engage in I don't want to engage in any way with her intellectual property in a way that brings her further notice or fans, because all I'm doing is giving her more money and more of a platform to be hateful toward trans people. So
yep. 100%. Exactly.
She can go fuck herself for all I care.
100%, Olivia.
We support that.
I can show you the cliff she can do it on.
Yeah.
I feel like the only fan fiction that I am familiar with is 50 Shades of Grey. And it's so poorly written. It's so bad. It's so bad.
That's the only reading we hate on in this.
So we do not judge people for their reading habits, but we do very loudly judge you for enjoying 50 Shades of Grey.
I think the world of fan fiction is hilarious. Like I have this old ship from a long, long time ago that actually, do you know Smart Bitches Trashy Books, Sarah Wendell? She also she also was fans of this. It came up organically when I was talking with her back long ago. CSI, the original series.
Yes.
Gil Grissom and Sarah Seidel were like, we were both, I shipped them and so did she. And it's so funny because if you go on AO3, because it's so long after the fact, there's like one really good, actually, writer holding it down for the entire fandom. There's nothing else basically going on except this one person who's writing like 350,000 words. Like it's like a case fic, like where they're following like a murder investigation, and it's really well written. It's an emotional, and it's like incredibly long, and they're holding down that entire fandom, and I salute them for that.
There's this one chick that does Emily and JJ fanfic for Criminal Minds, and they have like hold this whole sidetrack of how they're in this secret lesbian relationship and nobody knows. And Spencer keeps asking, and they're like, I don't know what you're talking about, Spence.
Oh man,
totally off track. I'm sorry.
I mean, I genuinely am obviously very fond of fanfic. So like, I did not write it, but I am fond of it.
Well, there you go. All right, so we've talked about how you've written fat and plus size women characters. only one of your books that I can think of, which is Shipwrecked. This one. This is my favorite in the spoiler alert series. Oh, these two are so sexy. That man is also a bigger body, Peter. And I was kind of wondering, why you decided to write him that way.
Right. I have a couple other male main characters who are larger. There was in Sweetest in the Gale, the third book, Cover Me. He is larger. In fact, the little illustration that I have in there, shows him too. And actually, Carl, who's going to be the next book in my the follow up to At First Spite, Second Chance Romance, he is larger, and I'm also going to my third book in my Zomromcom series is going to be a larger male main character too. I think when I started out, I was reacting to, I think, Hollywood. And the way that Hollywood always paired sort of larger men, often schlubbier men, with very conventionally beautiful, very thin women.
Like and King of Queens.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of books like that. And that they only put, if you look at Mike and Molly and others, if they had a fat female main character, they always paired her with a fat male main character.
Exactly.
Male character. And there is nothing wrong with that. But I felt like there was an implicit statement there that only a fat person could find another fat person attractive. Right.
Yeah.
Or only a fat man could find a fat woman attractive.
Yeah.
So I was reacting to that. But then I talked with, well, first of all, I have male readers too. And some of them were like, are really aching to be represented as well.
Yeah.
And also, I found a lot of men attractive who are not super larger dudes who are very hot. And but also I had a conversation with the late great Corey Alexander, who wrote as Zan West, and unfortunately passed away in 2020. But they talked to me about how well, first of all, they mentioned, and it's true, that in romance, that's how it works in Hollywood. But in romance, there had not been until recent years a ton of fat female main characters. But when we had them, they were always paired with fit, traditionally attractive male main characters. So romance as a genre does not have actually the problem that Hollywood has. And they also pointed out that sometimes if every pairing is with a fat female main character and a conventionally hot, fit, muscled, whatever male main character, that the implication there is that you somehow need the stamp of approval of a thin person. You're like, oh, seriously. Well, if he says I'm attractive, I must be attractive.
Yeah.
That somehow there's an idea that you need the approval of a thin person to be, legitimized as attractive and desirable as a fat person. And that part of the beauty of having two fat main characters fall in love and love each other is that they can find each other hot without any reference to what is considered conventionally attractive. They don't 100%. Need the stamp of approval of a thin person to be like, you're super hot and sexy.
Yeah.
And so that was very, I was like, you are completely right, And so what's happening in Hollywood is not what has happened traditionally in our genre.
Yeah.
Thank God.
And I think it's important. So I try to make the characters what makes sense for that character, but also try to be diverse. So within the spoiler alert series.
Yeah.
Generally guys who have lead roles in Hollywood are pretty buff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then
or they'll get fired.
Right. Particularly if they have an action-y type, role. But then I was like, but you could have, and then I put in Peter. And then my other books, I would say some of them, they might be more traditionally muscled, but a lot of them, they're just dudes. Martin in Teach Me, and most of the ones in, if not all, in Sweetest in the Gale, they're not necessarily, the female main character finds them attractive, but that doesn't mean that they're conventionally hot or that they're Hollywood types.
Yeah.
And I would say that even, Matthew in At First Sight is not like overly, he's actually like super thin at the beginning and fills out a little bit when he starts buying baked goods so he can tip
I feel
Athena
like
every
that's his
morning.
anxiety making him so thin,
Yeah.
though. Like, I think that man's just constantly shaking.
Right. And just, but he doesn't take, he's overworked and overburdened and doesn't take time to do it and just starts actually eating more, when during the course of the book. So, I mean, right. So it's important to me to have body diversity for my male main characters too. I wish that I had started doing that a little bit sooner as far as having fat male main characters too, but I am doing it now. And I did do it again in like 2018 with Cover Me with James. But yeah, it's important to me. So I'm going to try to make sure about at least someone in every series, if I do like a three book series, at least one of them is a fat male main character, because it also just, I think it's unrealistic to say that women only desire like hard bodies too. Like, and I don't see why we should sort of pretend that only hard-bodied men are attractive or sexy. So,
I mean, personally, I prefer a man with a little squish to him.
Yeah.
Me too.
I don't like a rock hard man. My husband is tiny, and he's gonna hate that I said this. He is 5'5" and like tiny. He's like 155, something like that. He is just a little rock of a man. But no, like normally, I like a good squishy guy. Like I need a.
Oh, this is
That
my
makes no sense.
my
I'm gonna
big
shut up.
celebrity crush has been Zachary Levi for years, and now he's getting all like gym bro beefed up, and I'm like, he's so much less attractive right now.
Also, if you listen to what's coming out of his mouth, also less attractive. Recent.
He said some things,
He has definitely said a lot of things lately.
Yes, he has.
Yeah. I found Chris Pratt more appealing, sort of in his days where he's on Parks and Rec.
Andy, he was Andy. Yes, I found the playful, obnoxious Andy more appealing than this cocky person.
That was hard for me because Chris Pratt, when he's in Parks and Rec, looks exactly like my youngest brother. So I was like, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I don't know about that. But speaking of talking about different body types, this is something that Molly and I harp on a lot on here because we would like to normalize regular sized dicks in romance novels. When we had Nikki on earlier this year, she was like, no, I want all the big fat dicks. So I kind of wanted to know
the better, she said.
The bigger the better. I kind of wanted to know what your thoughts were on penis size in romance novels.
I mean, I think that I try, most of my books, I don't think I actually specify, because I think in the end it really is like, I mean, a couple of cases they might say like, oh wow, you grew up well. I remember in one of them, like, I was like, I think in one of them they knew each other as kids and she hadn't seen him naked as kids, but she was like, puberty was very good to you. Like, but in a lot of them I don't really mention it because that's another aspect of body diversity.
Right.
And I do have male readers, and I also have, I think that if you get too much in, for me, it plays with something where, like if you make small dick jokes about people, there is an aspect of that I've talked to like trans readers, that is hurtful to them. Like, because you can be a man and not have a penis, and you can be a man and have a small penis, and like your maleness is not defined by that, and you can be sexy and sexual, like no matter what. And that I think that sometimes I don't want to be gender essentialist about like, you have to have this to be, men are like this and women are like this, and like sometimes that can play into that. Same thing is sometimes the whole like size gap thing, which a lot of people are into, which I mean, I get it, but sometimes the whole like, he's huge and she's so small, can get into like some gender essentialist things sometimes, where it seems like this is a fundamental like, and I don't know that this is something that I necessarily like, I try to shy away from in my own books, because so like some guys are gonna have big penises and some guys I'm not going to really mention it, and you can imagine whatever size you want because any size can feel good.
Yes, it
And
can.
like, so I don't really, so I mean, and I love Nikki Payne. Like
Yeah.
Nikki
Love
Payne,
her.
as I said before we started recording, Nikki Payne is a star, and she should
Agreed.
have millions of readers. And she's incredibly funny
Agreed.
and smart and such a great writer.
Such
In
a
this
great
way,
writer.
we diverge a little bit.
So talented.
Fair.
Nikki's so talented. But also, like, the science and the math of it all. If you
Like,
have a
you've got
6'5" guy who is like almost 300 pounds of muscle, and she's a 5'1" petite little sprite, how? Do the math, friends.
When we read Ice Planet Barbarians, I think Molly said something about her being like a frozen lollipop because she was like pogoing on top of him, and she's like this tiny girl, and I'm like, yeah, how does that work? I'm frequently texting our friend Katie going, can you tell me the mechanics of how, like, I literally just texted her today, can you tell me the mechanics of how she could be sitting on his face and they could be looking at each other in the eye? And she's like, I don't know, but that doesn't seem to work.
She also is our monster aficionado, so we definitely have questions for her a lot.
Yeah, she read the taken by Triceratops or something, and she was like texting us sentences and quotes from it, and I was like, what are you reading?
Oh, I was thinking about the Kraken one.
Oh yeah,
where I'm like, where are the tentacles going, guys?
There's not enough holes.
I think Ruby Dixon writes such compulsively readable books, and I gotta tell you, like,
there
was not a lot. She was the one who really started that whole.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure there were other people doing it too, but she's the one who really popularized and brought to the mainstream. She and then CM Nascosta with Morning Glory Milking Farm, like with the Minotaur. Those two really like burst that wide. That broke wide open when they did that.
I read Dragon's Bride over the summer.
Katie Roberts.
Katie Roberts, yeah. And was really surprised at how fucking sexy a dragon could be.
I love that it's just bringing us such a new batch of readers. We are hitting a new batch of readers with the monster loving, and I'm here for it.
I want to read Ruby Dixon's newest book. Oh gosh, it just drew a blank. It's so beautiful. Bull Moon Rising is what I think it's called.
Bull Moon Rising. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yes, the cover is so gorgeous, and it has these beautiful sprayed edges, and we got a copy in my library, and I was like, is this on hold for somebody? Because if not, I'm taking this home with me. It was. But okay, so I want to talk a bit about some heaviness that can be found in your books. So several of your books deal with characters who are experiencing mental health issues. Your 2024 release, which we talked about at First Bite, this is the cover for those of you watching online. It dives heavy into a story where the female main character, Athena, is battling a deep depression, which makes her unable to bathe herself, eat properly, get out of bed, or clean her home. As someone who has been to that low place myself, I really appreciate the care that you took with Athena. And I wanted to know why you bring the heaviness to these romance stories. Like, what makes you include that?
I mean, I guess I would think of it less. I mean, it can be thought of as heaviness. I think it's sort of emotional sort of heft is sort of how I think of it. In the case of talking about depression, I mean, part of the reason that I wrote it is because I experienced chronic depression, particularly the winter 2020, 2021. That winter was very bad to the point where, like, my husband climbed into the shower with me a few times to help me wash up, because it just felt impossible to me. And I thought that was such an intensely intimate and loving act. I'm really fortunate to have like a really wonderful husband. And I think when sometimes if you struggle in that sort of way, it can be hard to imagine that someone could love you anyway.
Yeah.
Like that, even if you're messy and you're not at your best and you're struggling really hard,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean that you can't be loved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that is, and it was important to me to then write a story about someone who, again, is very in a messy place, both literally and figuratively,
Yeah.
and is struggling really hard. But that does not mean that she's not worthy of love and that she cannot be loved.
Yeah.
And so, like, that was important for me to have in a book.
Yeah.
So, some books I write just for the fun of it, and then some books there's some things maybe that I want to say. Like, spoiler alert, there was a few things I wanted to say
Yeah.
in there, and that was, the scene where, he, comes through her window because he hasn't seen her in days, doesn't know what's happening with her, and is
Yeah.
extremely worried about her.
Yeah.
And then also the scene where, with her consent, he, gets into the bathtub with her and bathes her, helps
He's
bathe her.
fully clothed.
Yeah, because
In the
this is
tub with
not
her.
because it's not sexual. It's
No.
intimate,
But it
but it
is
is not
so
sexual.
deeply intimate and personal. It's
That's
so
why
beautiful.
the special bonus dust jacket we have is an illustration of that scene. And a lot of people looked at it and they thought that it was like a hot scene.
Not this one.
And it is actually
Is it this one?
not.
No,
I mean, it's intimate.
it is. It's
To me, that scene, like, it kind of brought tears to my eyes, because when I'm in my dark place, which fortunately I am much better, but this year was rough for me because I was having physical pain and I was dealing with a lot of shit at work. I will text Molly and Katie in our group chat and also tell my husband, don't give up on me. That's my thing. Like, don't give up on me. I'm not shutting you out. I'm fighting my own. I love Francesca Zappia. She's become a friend of our podcast. She writes incredible
spectacular
YA books, and her book Eliza and Her Monsters, she has a line in there that says, there's a monster in my brain that controls my doubt. And what I tell my people is, there's a monster in my brain that's controlling my doubt right now, and it's not who I am. And fortunately, I have this amazing support system. Like you were saying with your husband, like, I have an amazing support system who will tell me, okay, if today you can't feel like showering, let's make a to-do list, because they know that's where my brain is. That to-do lists go really well for me. And my to-do list will include things like take a shower, and then under that, subsets, you have to wash your hair. You have to do that. Like, it's been too long. And Elise Meyer, who is like a fantastic TikTok influencer, she talked about how when she went through a really deep depression, there was a woman who would wash her hair, who would have her come to her salon and wash her hair, and how emotionally intimate that act was to show such kindness to somebody, because she just couldn't physically care for herself. And this was one thing that this woman could do for her. And to me, seeing that, it was fucking beautiful. It was fucking beautiful.
I am not on the depressive side. I am the ADHD side. I am constantly apologizing for the space I take up.
Yeah, she did it today, and I was like, stop doing that.
I am constantly apologizing for, look, I interrupt. I don't do it on purpose. It is my brain. It says the words, and I don't control that. But I am always constantly apologizing for just taking up space. And so for someone that is ashamed of always consuming space, I can understand that feeling of not wanting to be, right? Not being there, not wanting to be present. Because, like, this is from Deborah Harkness's series. It's Weaver Snot. It's her glam. It's how she hides herself. I'm always trying to make myself less shiny. And it is such a beautiful thing when you can take and show our darkest, deepest points and show us we are still lovable. That is huge, Olivia. And I don't think you know that. That is huge. Showing someone they are still lovable is bigger than any dick I've ever seen in a book.
I think it's
I had to make it light. Sorry, I was getting too heavy.
I think it's also interesting too that at that time, Matthew is not a partner of hers. He's the neighbor that she's fucking with, that she doesn't
Annoying,
really have
honestly.
a great relationship with. She doesn't really even like him. I mean, they're on their way to becoming friends, but he just cares enough as a human. There just are not enough good humans in this world, and that really bugs me. And I love that he is so kind to her and gentle with her.
I'm gonna go off track because the ADHD one. Friend, you know, he kind of looks like a cartoon character. Not Dexter. What is Archer? He kind of looks like Archer Smith.
I think he looks like young Pierce Brosnan.
Sorry, totally ADHD moment. I apologize.
In my mind, he's very much like Rufus Sewell when he was a little bit. That's sort of how I. But I am glad that. I mean, I'm very sorry that you've struggled and serve in different ways with that sort of stuff. I mean, but I think that is the beauty of romances, specifically when they have characters who are not sort of super shiny perfect.
Yeah.
Characters who do have struggles in a variety of ways, and the romance says by its very existence, because it is a genre romance, you are lovable, you will be loved, you can have a happy ending too.
Yeah.
Like you deserve and can have a happy ending too.
Do you feel a little bit like you're giving us therapy right now? Are you our therapist? I feel like you're turning into it.
You know, I think when I wrote the book At First Sight, I knew that the hope was that it would connect with people, with everyone, but be a special connection for people who had struggled in various ways, perhaps with mental health issues. So I knew that it was sort of opening up for conversations about that. So I'm honored that you feel, that you feel comfortable enough to talk to me about it.
Oh, I'm comfortable with everyone. That's my problem.
A lighter note, when we were at Novel Grounds prior to interviewing Emma Berry, there were 3 young women who were walking around and they were trying to find book recommendations. And I think they thought I worked there because I just know a lot about books. And, so I started talking to them about At First Sight. And I was like explaining, like, there's a heaviness to it because there's some mental health stuff. But I was like, and then I started talking about the solo scene in there, and all 3 of them went, solo scene sold. And they all 3
That is actually, I have heard from people that for them, that is probably the hottest of the sex scenes in the book.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It is very hot.
That's the one where my editor inserted a gif of James McAvoy fanning himself. Like,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can confirm, Book Besties.
Yeah.
Confirm.
I was like,
it's the windows and the angling, and it's just like, okay,
and him
Olivia, let's
watching
go.
her in the dark. I don't know. Maybe I'm a little creepy, but I was like, damn. And then I read it to my husband. I was like, no, you don't understand. Listen. And I read it to him and he was like, okay, I get it.
You know how many times I've taken an audiobook out, rewound it, and be like, here.
Yes. My husband has heard a lot of romance novels where, it's not like he doesn't like them anyway, but, all right. So I want to talk about, a little less heavy. So let's talk about the banging. So Molly and I talk about, your books being the shift in your seats goodness. And, this literally
Katie
started
for that line. That's a Katie line.
That was my line.
Oh, Katie said that first to Nikki Payne. I could go back to the tapes.
No, she didn't. I said it when we were reading Spoiler Alert. I was like, this reading April is shifting my seat as I'm driving
Katie
home.
said it.
This is not important. This is not important. We can fight about this later.
Sorry, Olivia.
Do you have a favorite spicy, sexy scene that you've written?
I mean, I think the window scene with Athena is probably. I realized I had not written a scene like that, and I'm like, well, here we go.
Here we go.
I think that Zomromcom. Usually, I try to at least have some measure of reality, but since it's set in a world where, there's vampires and zombies and things like that, and the male main character is a vampire, I'm like, I don't have to hew completely to reality here. I can go a little over the top with the sex scene. And
Getting all
so
giddy.
I went over the top with the sex scene. So I would say that was it was a lot of fun to write. It was also quite lengthy, but also just very enjoyable to write. As far as like it was just fun too. Like Zomromcom, my goal in writing it was I did not want to cry writing it, and I did not want people to cry reading it. It's meant to be really fun and funny and actiony,
Yeah.
and like less of sort of the I mean, it's again, it's actiony. It's not
Yeah.
like one of my contemporary romances, so there's not going to be a storyline like the Depression storyline. There's going to be
Right.
that backstory and stuff, but yeah, I could just have like a blast with it
That's
and be a
amazing.
little silly.
I can't
So
wait.
The
I'm
cover
so
design
excited.
was just released and it's so cute. I'm so
It
excited
is.
for it. I literally, when you were here this summer and I met you this summer, when you talked about it in your presentation, I pulled up my phone and pre-ordered it. It was available to pre-order at the time. There was no cover yet, but I was like, yep, sold. Zomromcom. I'm doing it.
well, thank you. I am really excited about it. It was, I really like writing different types of things, and it was really fun just to. At first sight, I really am super proud of it. I think it's probably
It's so good.
some of the best
Really
writing I've
good.
done.
It's really
But
good.
it was emotionally, the
Draining.
words came fine, but it was very emotionally very difficult to write because a lot of it is sort of torn straight from my heart, and I just needed to write something that was not going to make me cry.
That's fair.
And I really had just a fantastic time writing Zomromcom, which I think is going to be, I think it's very evident when you read it, and hopefully readers will enjoy it just as much. So I think the galley should be out pretty soon, within the next month or so, I think.
I'm sure we're gonna flip. I'm certain of it.
We're gonna love it. We're gonna love it. All right. So one of the things that really turns my stomach in a romance novel is when the bedroom banter is just not hitting. Like I can't do it if it doesn't have good banter. You are so extremely good at writing the good banter. And actually that was one of the things we told Emma too. Emma Barry, her banter is so good. In At First Spite, there is a scene where Matthew is literally between Athena's legs, and then he just like sits up and he's like, just so you know, I'm not going to be able to hear you down here. So here's what I need you to do. And I was like, damn, that was so sexy. So how do you pull this sexy conversations and like, how do you do this?
I mean, I have found that, it's something that I need to lead up to it in the writing. I can't just start writing in the middle of a sex scene. Like if I'm writing it, I try to finish it in one writing session. If not, but I can't really sort of start midstream in that. And then I just write what feels sexy to me, but also like in that scene, I was also thinking about the logistics. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, particularly if you're a woman with larger thighs.
Yeah.
Like there's no, like, he's not going to hear anything down there. And if he's new to it, which he is, then, then he's going to want, and he's going to be someone who's going to want guidance.
Right.
Because he wants to make sure that she's enjoying it and is there for her pleasure and really wants her to be pleased.
Yeah.
And so he's going to have to figure out a way for her to sort of direct him.
Yeah.
And so, a lot of that stuff, sex scenes to me, I want to have a good time, but they shouldn't necessarily be interchangeable in the sense that the way that they act in bed should make sense for their characters.
Yeah.
And in his case, like, again, in his circumstance, he's going to want guidance. And like, there's no other way given her body, there is no other way that he's going to get except by pulling his hair.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I was like, damn. Because you're right. It is the logistics of it. Like, what do you do? But it was so, I need to fangirl for a second. He was so careful with the way that he said it, and it wasn't like at all offensive. And she was like, okay, cool, I got this. And it was like, they both were so comfortable in that moment. And I feel not always totally comfortable in my body. And so to be able, like, her to be like, not feeling judged at all in that moment was sorry. I had to fangirl for a moment.
I appreciate that. I mean, I think that it helps that it's very clear, like, I think to her and to the readers that, like, he's super into her.
Mm.
Yeah.
Like, really just loves the way she looks and thinks she's incredibly, like, beautiful and sexy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, that doesn't necessarily mean that she's traditionally, even apart from her fatness.
Yeah.
My characters may not be traditionally beautiful, even apart from fatness.
Mm-hmm.
But it's how you perceive that person
Yeah.
because you love them and you desire them.
Yeah.
And like, and so, yeah. So I
Yeah.
think for her, and again, I try not to have, I don't write people typically, female main characters who, April had some insecurities, although it was less about how she felt about her body,
Mm-hmm.
but she was not confident of what other people would feel about her body.
Yeah.
But I basically, since then, pretty much everyone else has been, it's been,
Mm-hmm.
the scene that you mentioned, I really liked that part. That I was proud of that part I wrote with Lauren in All the Fields, where she's naked for the
Mhm.
first time, and I think she says something like, she's like, my body may not, be conventionally attractive, but it's strong, it's
Mm-hmm.
mine, and he
Mhm.
clearly wants it, so I'm not
Mm-hmm.
going to sit here and be ashamed of,
Yeah.
like, you know, and so yeah, it's important to me to have people. My hope is that if you show people on the page who are accepting of their bodies, who are
Mm-hmm.
fat and are accepting of their bodies, that maybe you emerge from that. If you read that often enough, maybe, and if I write that often enough, it's something that sort of takes root inside you, where
Mm-hmm.
you're like,
Mhm.
I think that words are extremely powerful.
Yeah.
And I think if you
Agreed.
read often enough that your body is something to be ashamed of, that
Yeah.
grows within you.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
But that if you write or read enough times that your
Yeah.
body is something that can be loved and desired
Yeah.
exactly as it is, that can push aside all the other crap that's been put in there.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that is partially my goal. So I basically almost always write, my fat female main characters who are proud of their bodies or accept their bodies, or their bodies just are no big deal to them and they
Yeah.
accept that they're desired, and it's not like a surprise to them.
Yeah.
Right.
They're confident in their sexuality for the most part because I want to supplant
Yeah.
all that other shit that
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
with larger bodies have been hearing.
Yeah.
I'm 48. I grew up in that whole period that you were talking
We
about,
Yeah.
know.
and so,
Heroin
like,
chic.
I wanna replace all that as much as
Mm-hmm.
I can, push it out with
Yeah.
what I'm writing.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
we're getting really good with our media about it. My kids don't look at themselves like that.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
don't know
And
that I would
and
say it's the media. I would say it's just this generation of kids who have
oh my God.
changed how
My
we view
girls,
sexuality and things.
I have a 15-year-old and a 14-year-old. And when I tell you they are more confident, self-assured, proud of who they are, they know who they are. I could not say that back then. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I just, they're just growing up with different systems. And I think
Yeah.
it starts with us, but
Mm-hmm.
like, what you're doing is huge.
Yeah.
And I made no sense and it tied nothing together. Next question,
Oh,
April. I'm
no, I
sorry.
mean, but I mean that it does partially. A lot of it, I think, comes down to parenting. I mean, one of
Yeah.
the things that I knew, I have a 15-year-old, and I was
Isn't it fun?
determined. It's actually It's been the last year or so has been way easier than it had been previously. But he's always been a great kid, just
Yeah.
a great kid with difficult times
Hormones.
sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I was just determined that he not grow up hearing me say, even though I've struggled with body image and have
Mhm.
a history of disordered eating before, where like dieting just went way too far.
Yeah.
And like got caught up in diet culture shit. But I was determined that he, unlike me, not grow up hearing his mom talk shit about her own body.
100%.
I mean,
100%.
much less his, but I was like, he does not need to hear any thoughts that I may have,
Yeah.
which I've tried to again push out those thoughts myself. But the
Right.
ones that are left from my upbringing and like media and all of that,
Yeah.
I tried my best to make sure that if someone was going to, it wasn't going to come from me.
Yeah.
Like anything else he heard, it was not going to be me about him. It was not going to be me about me or me about
Yeah.
anyone else.
Yeah.
And I think so I think the way and that was one of the unexpected really beauties of raising a kid is that, and I wrote an essay in Scary Mommy about it,
Mm-hmm.
about how being a parent, forced me to find a vocabulary for my own body that was not hurtful.
Yeah.
Because he would ask questions. He would look at my body, like when we took a bath together, and like look at my varicose veins or like my moles and ask about them just out of innocent curiosity.
Because
And
he's a kid.
I refused as a baby, and I would refuse, a toddler. I would refuse to say something, so my varicose veins in my leg. I was like, it's a blueberry river, and we would pretend to like drink it together.
Mm-hmm.
And my moles, I would say they were chocolate chips, and we'd be like, pretend to eat the chocolate chips, and like talk about my body. That was before I was writing. To talk about my body in a way that was not harmful.
Yeah.
And that helped me, even though the vocabulary is different. That practice really helped me when I started writing romance.
Yeah.
Because I'd already sort of begun to have a vocabulary for myself that was not hurtful or self-loathing.
On that note, this is a beautiful transition.
Yes.
Do you have a favorite and least favorite term for a vagina to use in a sex scene?
I think that, there's what I personally like, but there's also what's appropriate for the characters.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, you may notice that Matthew, a lot of times, will use actually more medical terms. Or he just won't use the terms because he's someone who's a little shyer, so he's not going to be, like, busting out, again, excuse my language, like pussy or something like that. He's just
Don't ever apologize for your language here.
Yes.
Not on Book Besties.
So, like, it's got to be
some of the words we
appropriate.
say.
It's got to be appropriate for the character. And so I would say my least favorite term as far as in a sex scene is I hate cum.
Mm-hmm.
I hate that.
Yes.
You will never see that in mine. But my favorite, I've grown increasingly fond of dick. Like, it was cock for a long time.
Yeah.
But now I kind of feel like somebody said once, and I think it's true, that most men, when they're referring to their own, would say dick rather than cock. And that I think that when it's in a male POV, then I'm more often saying dick now. But at the same time, if you're in the middle of a sex scene, you can't keep repeating like dick, dick, dick. So you gotta mix it up. So there's different ways to sort of go about it, but sex scenes can be difficult because you're like, you got to mix it up as far as the terminology while still keeping it hopefully sexy, but while keeping it also appropriate to the character.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's sort of the trick in all of it. So I will use a variety of different terms except Zomromcom. Yeah. But my favorite is probably dick.
Nice.
Just don't refer to it to clam chowder and we'll be friends.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about what book that was, April.
No, for me in that book, that was the issue was, never mind. We're not going to talk about it. I can't. I'll throw up. It's bad. Oh my gosh. All right. So you just released a short story that was part of a short story collection through Amazon. Yours is called All by My Elf. And it's part of the collection's called Under the Mistletoe. What can you share with us, which Molly and I have already read the story, but what else can you share with us about this story and how did the collection come together?
Amazon contacted my agent to sort of say, is this something that Olivia would be interested in? And I was like, as a matter of fact, yes, because I love writing. That's a short story. I've written novellas before. This was actually my first time writing a short story. It's only 12,000 words. And they said they wanted a full sex scene in there. I'm like, oh, wow. It's like,
we're going to get right to it.
I was like, that's a challenge. That's a challenge, but I'm going to try. And here's the thing, is a few months back, I had seen a bunch of articles in like USA Today about how they were hiring for the Wienermobile. And I was like, first of all, I was like, I really want to know how this works. Because it is like 2 or 3 people. That's the same thing for the Nutmobile, the Planet Speed's Nutmobile, because I researched both of them a lot more than I probably should have. And
you're right as an author. Do all the research.
The search history of authors is just chaotic.
So the Wienermobile typically has 2, although I put 3 in mine, and then the Nutmobile typically has 3. Anyway, but I was like, I love forced proximity. It is my catnip. It is my jam. I love having forced proximity. And I was like, but I wouldn't want, and I did want to use the Wienermobile because I think it's hilarious. Like at some point, but you can't use the brand name. So I have like an off-brand, repurposed Wienermobile for the book. But I didn't want to write an entire like full-length book about an off-brand Wienermobile. So I was like, this seems like the perfect opportunity to use my Wienermobile knowledge. Wienermobile knowledge. So I was like, okay, and then we can get it into Christmas and we can have them, get, on an interstate because I mean, it's bad weather, but they have events like a lot of days per year. I was like, this is something where they could get stuck like in a snowstorm on the interstate and, have sex aboard the Wienermobile because I gotta tell you, a lot of plots get recycled a lot in romance, and that's true of mine as well, although I say we all have different voices, so like even the same plot will feel very different with different authors. But I'm like, I do not remember a ton of people having like a romance where people have sex aboard a repurposed Wienermobile. So I was like, I feel like this is a chance to break new ground. How often do you have that opportunity? So I went for it. And because I'm me, I'm like, they should be underpaid academics. Because I had to. The thing is the people who usually do the Wienermobile are typically new college graduates who like, basically this is their first job. They get a year. It's actually paid. They get benefits, etc. But I don't write new college graduates. So I'm like, what would be the reason late 30s people would be on this? And I was like, who's off during the Christmas holidays? And then I was thinking high school teachers because and Emma pointed out that, that's also something for colleges and universities. And then someone who would need extra money, because we've talked before about, the adjunct instructors and sort of just how badly they're paid and treated. And like there's a growing sort of adjunctification of higher education where they're hiring very few like tenure track, full-time, benefits paid people, and then getting more and more people who are sort of barely scraping by and having to sort of put together jobs from a variety of different schools and or do extra things like this, like being on the Mince-mobile for Mrs. Claus's mincemeat treats.
It's the spotted dick, man.
The amount of dick jokes that you can get in that story, I was dying. I mean, I'm on page 2 and I am cracking up. And I don't always read when I'm at work, but I was with this story and I'm literally laughing out loud. And my coworker just like turns and looks at me and I was like, I don't know what to tell you. It's just really funny.
I appreciate that you enjoyed it. I know for some readers, the repurposed Wienermobile was a wiener too far.
This is where you guys draw the line. That's where you guys draw the line.
I know
barbarian dummies.
I know it is quirky, but it is very much my sense of humor. So hopefully the people who are naturally drawn to my writing thought it was funny too.
We get it. It's hilarious.
It's
It's hilarious.
Oh man. All right. So what's next for you? I know Zomromcom that comes out in August 2025. Is that right? Do you have anything else coming out or expecting to publish soon?
Last I heard, maybe November, but late next year, a little bit after Zomromcom, should be the follow-up to At First Bite. It's going to be Carl the Baker, Matthew's best friend, and the Sadie Brazen's narrator, audiobook narrator, who was a childhood not quite sweetheart, friends, never quite sweethearts, who left town at the end of high school and has not been back, and he's sort of, once he rediscovered her on those audiobooks, has been listening to them every morning in the bakery. And at first, people thought it was Sadie Brazen herself, although you do find out who Sadie Brazen is, by the way,
Oh, okay.
in the second book, because she is also a character in the second book.
Nice.
But you find out that he's really listening for Molly, the narrator. And then she comes back to town because of a mistaken obituary that runs for him, and she thinks that he has passed away, and she comes to town to like pay her respects, but he's alive. Because otherwise,
You Ross Gellered her?
I was going to say, that's Ross Geller.
Right. Otherwise, it would be a very different sort of romance if he were actually dead.
Yes.
I mean, I could write that romance, but that was not what I did.
That was not it. So do we see Athena and Matthew again in this book?
Yes. And in fact, a question that you had sort of asked, talk to me about was if there was a scene that I regret cutting. I did have to cut a chapter where they were playing Pictionary, the four of them. And I had a great time writing it because it was just, I really love having them all bounce off of each other. Particularly since Athena was trying to get Carl to express himself. So she'd like come up with custom Pictionary clues that were like impossible to draw. Like, the importance of being earnest, and then tell it to my heart, and like express yourself. Anyway, and so Molly is completely like, "What? I don't understand why." And Carl's like, "I'm gonna fucking kill you," to Athena. And then, it was written from Molly's perspective. So she's like, what was it that the importance of being earnest. What did she say? My original. I'll put it up on my website once the book is out.
Okay.
As a deleted scene. She says, because it's that same time period. She's like, if the next clue is asking me to illustrate Hedda Gabler, I'm sprinting into the night and escaping this Pictionary game. I just had a lot of fun writing it, but like it honestly was not advancing the plot. It was just for my amusement, and it was already running long. So my editor's like, "Yeah, that's got to go." And I'm like,
we need those scenes. We got to get them out of our head. If you don't write them, they'll haunt you.
It'll show up on my website because I amused myself greatly. So that'll show up on my website eventually.
All right, so now that we're on the topic of writing and what you've had to cut, I'm going to let Molly take over because she likes to ask writing questions. So, and then we have a final question that we like to ask all of our authors.
Okay.
So Molly?
She's like, fantastic. Can't wait. So, plotter or pantser to start?
I am more and more a plotter as time goes on. Like my first book, I did not plot. And then it turns out that it was actually lacking a plot. And it turns out like it will never be published. It was 90,000 words of just banter and sex. And like, while that's...
Can I read it?
It turns out like publishers do appreciate a plot. So
I've been there.
But I found that I actually need to like plot it out ahead. And as time has gone on, I have begun to plot out more ahead of time. Particularly for action-y books like the Zomromcom and the follow-up, which I'm writing now. Because I need to check for plot holes. Because if, there's things like, well, what do they know? What don't they know at that point? What else could they have done that I didn't think about? And like, why wouldn't that work? I've got to make it make sense. My editor sometimes, well, why did they do that? And I'm like, because my plot required that. But that is not a good enough answer. I have to figure out why they would do that, actually. It's easier for me to sort of do that ahead of time so that I don't write myself into something where like it doesn't, they're like, well,
yourself into a corner and you're like, well, we're screwed now.
Yeah. So yes, I'm a plotter.
Yeah. I pants, but it backfires. I have like a 85K novel that has a massive plot hole that'll never see the light of day because I just don't have it in me to fix it. I don't. I'm still mad at myself. Sorry. So who usually talks to you first? Is it your main character, your setting? How do you get to where we're going?
Each book is different for me. So a couple of books I wrote entirely because I was inspired by the title. Like the book 40 Love, I
I love
went
that.
through a brief period where I was watching a ton of tennis. And one of the games, there was a 40 Love. And I'm like, that would be an excellent name for a book where it's like a 40-year-old falling in love. And, I was like, there should be an age gap. And I get tired of the male female age gap where the male's always older. So I was like, well, it should be the person. And then I was like, he could be a tenant anyway. And that's where that sort of the inception of that was. And Zomromcom was the same way. I just thought Zomromcom was hilarious as a
I
title.
love that.
So in my story ideas folder, I had that in all caps for years, just like Zomromcom. But I had no idea. I was like, oh, write zombies. And then one day I actually had a little bit of time, I thought. And I was like, well, if I were to write that, how would I even do that? Like, in a way that felt good to me, because I did not want the zombies to be former humans, because to me, then it's sort of inescapably sad, and I did not want this to be sad. I mean, there has to be some sort of emotional, so that there's stakes, but I did not want to be like, those are my neighbors. I did not.
I just killed Terry.
Yeah. And so then I started there, and I started like, well, what if they were? I was like, well, it could work if they were blah. And then I sort of moved out from there, and then the next thing I know, I was writing a book. Others like Unraveled from which is in Sweetest in the Gale, was originally part of a collection called He's Come Undone, which is about starchy male main characters basically becoming undone by love.
I love
and so that was sort of like an archetypal character sort of to start with. At First Sight, I think, started out with the idea that I really want to write a messy female main character, because most of my female main characters are really together.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to somehow imply that somehow if you're messy that you can't be loved. And so I wanted to write about depression, but also just general, like, being uncertain about your career, and like just basically being a very messy point in your life. And still, still being lovable and being loved.
Absolutely.
So every book sort of has different, and then sometimes the plot appeals to me, like a plot aspect,
So you're a pantser when it comes to ideas.
Yeah, I am a pantser when it comes to ideas, but when it comes down to like actually beginning to write a book, I will plot it out first.
I love that. I am the invisible friends talk to me, and I have to write it down before they go away.
Right. And I am not. That's not typically how I write, but it's once I get into the writing, then I start having more of that. But I gotta actually figure it out first. Sometimes if there's a plot, I have to figure out what character type and backstory would make that plot like feasible.
Yeah.
Because I want it to make sense for the character.
Right.
So like in the case of like At First Sight, I was like, well, under what circumstance could she end up stuck between these two brothers? If I want that to happen, like for maximum mess. Yeah. Then how do I make that happen? And then I was like, okay. And then you start thinking about, okay, how does that make sense? And then I started working on the characters from there.
I mean, well, the Spite House alone is just spectacular.
It's so funny.
It's just so funny. It's so funny. So you said, so you keep I'm assuming you keep notes and all that. Then you're like a notebook gal.
I am a computer file gal. Because my handwriting has gone to hell in the last
word.
And it hurts my hand now. So
I want to just type.
Okay, April, we're on you, girl, because she answered the editing room floor earlier question.
Okay, so this will be good too, because you are writing, or Zomromcom has a vampire in it. So settle a debate. Weigh in on our debate. Do vampires have sperm?
In my book. In my book, they do. And in fact, I talk about it in the book.
Nice.
Because she asks him. Okay, so I don't know if you just want me. I will read you the section if you want.
Yes, that'd be great.
She's like, how do vampires get erections anyway? I would have thought there'd be blood flow issues. And then he scowls at her. He says, vampires aren't dead human. Our blood flows perfectly well. Just because it's cooler than yours and circulates more slowly doesn't mean we can't. Okay. She raised a hand in surrender. She said, forget I asked. Anyway, since we've established that your erections are chilly and sluggish but serviceable, why don't I? And then she just likes really making fun of him. And they're not chilly and sluggish, but like, so he protests, but she's like basically saying. Anyway, so yes, there is a discussion of erections and.
Oh my God, Olivia, I love you.
Yes,
I love you.
The premise behind sort of is that the supernaturals here are not supernatural in the sense they're just a different type of natural.
Gotcha.
So like they basically are different species.
Yeah,
that
Kind of
have,
like Allie Hazelwood in Bride.
Yeah.
Right. I haven't read that yet, but yeah, I mean,
my bad.
and that a lot of these groups, like the vampires, they don't tend to have children easily,
Mhm.
which is why they haven't taken over the world. Humans are much more prolific.
Yeah.
But that they do like have children sometimes, and like so it's just a different type of natural.
I love it.
I love it. I love it.
I cannot wait to read it. It's going to be fantastic.
I
She
cannot wait
makes
for
fun of him
Zomromcom.
like continually, and it is really enjoyable.
That's my kind of flirting.
I love it.
Berating you till you
That's
cry.
how my husband and I still flirt. And our oldest child, who is 11 and autistic, has just picked up that what we're doing is flirting, and he's really grossed out by it. And so we had to have a whole conversation with him about like you should be so lucky that your parents still like each other enough to flirt with each other.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Now, Olivia, you are wonderful. Thank you so much.
This has been a blast, love. Truly.
Well, it has been wonderful chatting with you, and hopefully, we talked about all the stuff you want to talk about, and a lot of stuff you probably did not want to talk about.
Oh, we talked about all the things.
That's Book Besties.
That's kind of the point.
If you ever want to come back again, if you want to come back to talk about Zomromcom or the sequel, it's not Dearly Departed anymore. What is it called again?
It's called Second Chance Romance.
Second Chance Romance. So if you want to come back and talk about either of those, or you just want to...
welcome anytime.
Listen, we have authors that pop on and just talk about other people's books. That's fine.
You want to come and read with us? You can come read with us.
You are more than welcome.
Well, I appreciate that a lot. And I really appreciate all your kindness and sort of support of my books and your enthusiasm for what I write, because it really means the world to me. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Your books are awesome. I don't know what else to say.
All right.
So this is our last episode of season 7. We are taking January off, although the last Tuesday of January, we will have the season 8 premiere. And that episode will also feature an author. We'll have more details on our social media, so check that out. And then when we roll into February, it'll be a month full of romance novels, which we will have a guest. We will have... I still don't know if she pronounces her last name Award or A-word, but Amy Award or A-word. And she'll come and talk to us about The Cock on the Block. I just confirmed that with her today. So very excited about that. Season 8, lots of great authors coming on. So we're really excited
about season 8.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of cool books on there.
And if you haven't already started following on Instagram, Nurse Katie and I are doing our winter version of Smut Girl Summer, which we're calling Warm Winter Bitches.
They're actually in the middle of it now because Wibbly Wobbly, Tiny Wimey.
We started for December. So check that out. We'll be reviewing spicy holiday themed romances, and some are just like in the winter, like we've got a hockey romance in there. So yeah, that's what we've got coming up. Thank you all so much. Olivia, thank you. You're amazing.
Olivia, thank you. We've enjoyed this so much.
This is like, so good.
We'll see you guys in season 8.
Yeah, season 8.
Thank you again, and happy holidays.
Yeah. Bye, everybody. Thank you for joining us on Book Besties with special guest author Olivia Dade. Don't forget to like and subscribe. The views discussed here are those of April and Molly, not those of anyone else. Your book besties are Molly Biggs and April Watkins, editing by Thomas Watkins, and music is Sleep Sweetly by Brigida. Don't forget to follow the Book Besties on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. If you'd like to contact the Book Besties, please email us at bookbestiespod@gmail.com or visit our website, bookbestiespodcast.com. Until next time, besties, get lost in your favorite book.